If you feed people, if you share what you have, your resources, then honestly, it's simple acts of kindness, simple acts of being together. And we need it now more than ever, because as I say, the way the politics of this country are going now, it's a scary time for a lot of us. I sit here and I know I'm with people who don't look at me through that lens. But when I walk out that door, I don't know who's here that thinks I don't belong here just because I don't look like them.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this very special screening of Everybody to Kenmure Street. I'm delighted to have Felipe, the director, with us, and of course Tab, that you've just seen on the big screen behind you. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start off by asking something that's very generic, but I'm sure many people would like to know, is how did you put that project together? What were the first steps? How did you collate all the archives? How did you from the get-go decide you were going to make a feature film out of this?
So it's all the questions at once, really.
Set the scene for us.
I think for me it was very much my own curiosity at first and a guilt also for not turning up. I lived in Govan Hill at the time, which is a 10-minute walk from Kenmure Street. And, I'm the son of a Chilean refugee from the Pinochet dictatorship, so solidarity has been really important throughout my life. And I received the same picture that most people who turn up on that morning received, and I just didn't really see the hope. There'd been quite a few events leading up to Kenmure Street where the police had quite violently repressed, silent vigils, peaceful demonstrations, and it really felt, well, this is the blueprint, this is what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And part of it from my previous film, Ne Pasarán, which was another story of Scottish solidarity, but for Chile, and it was a story I heard as a kid. I ended up, talking to various people involved with the Home Office and the Foreign Office, and there was really that sense of protest doesn't work anymore. I remember talking to a civil servant who said, there's 1 million people outside his window, and office window, protesting against the war in Iraq, and he just got a bit noisy and then literally just closed the window and just went back to work. So it felt there was, despite that whole history, that there was a way that maybe we needed to rediscover a new way to protest, and mine was quite selfishly I'm just not going to go. But from following on social media, I realized that not only there was something new happening, and then I had this feeling that I feel like I've let down people from my past, not necessarily people at Kenmure Street, because I didn't know, I know quite a few people and, we've become friends, but I didn't know them then. Because solidarity, you just realize you're just going to have to do it over and over again. But then, came 537, and that footage that kind of went viral, and 10 million people saw it within a few hours of the van doors opening up, and everybody getting that same sort of release of collective joy of something that was absolutely not inevitable, that beautiful outcome, really forged that from all these people kind of coming together and coming with ways to constantly diffuse the situation. And, despite years of being involved in solidarity movement, I've never kind of felt that, how often you go to a protest and exactly what you want within 8 hours. It clearly does something to your brain chemistry, and I missed out on it. So the next day I was on Kenmure Street and talking to one person I knew would send me the picture, and because it was COVID, there wasn't any really practical filmmaking that could happen. Mm-hmm. But at first I sort of had to figure out also, but where was the hope for you? And most people say, well, there wasn't. We just felt we had to turn up. And so, it's literally the first 3 months of taking a different person around Queen's Park and having a conversation about what happened on the day, but also how much time in your life do you have for something like this? What inspired you to go? Which started all these kind of different themes started kind of percolating together. And it was around the same time of eventually meeting Van Man, which, as you can imagine, became a sort of a near mythical character around Glasgow in a few weeks, and was refusing interviews with everyone. And it's literally just having that time to talk to, I talked to about 150 people. There's 33 of them in the film. I think there was sort of kind of trust growing around the project. I met Tab within that first week, And often he was like, who should I talk to next? Do you have any footage? So if very much this kind of baton relay, which in a way mirrors how the protest developed itself. And and then Valman telling me about, I'm happy to talk to you. Part of it was because it's in Ne Pasarán. Part of it because he had friends who sort of kind of vouched for me. And then he told me about the nurse, which we hadn't seen in any footage. Nobody had talked about her. I ended up talking to her, and she was like, well, I want to be able to be doing this type of thing again. So anonymity is really good. So there was all these kind of things that I suppose there were obstacles to making a documentary, but I wasn't too worried because I felt, well, I've got time until we can actually get people in a room. And because of Ne Pasarán, I'm answering a few questions at the same time now. Because of Ne Pasarán,
context, thank you.
One day I received a really beautiful letter from Emma Thompson, who has her own connection with Chile, and she, told me how much she appreciated the film. And when Emma Thompson writes you write back. And so we had this sort of correspondence. And while I was having this conversation with these people, understanding, okay, well, maybe we can use actors, and but how do we kind of mirror this sort of urgency and out of the box thinking, and that sort of defines, and more importantly for me, that kind of sense of humor that is really, that's how I remember from Solidarity movement from my childhood, this accessibility to humor and emotion at the same time, and still be completely dedicated to what you're doing. Like really the whole package. And I just had this image of Emma Thompson underneath the van, and it made me laugh. And I was like, well, I'm going to ask her. And she said yes. And I think that kind of started the whole process of how do we approach the telling of that story with a bit more creativity, but also kind of really fueled by, I suppose, the passions of the day.
Wow, okay. Thank you very much. I have more questions about that, but I'm going to come to you, Tab, just for now. If could you tell us a bit more about, first of all, do you still live there? Do you still live near Kenmure Street?
Yeah.
So
never moved.
So how has it been since then? Is there still a sense of solidarity in the neighbourhood? Has it galvanised people to take action? What's the outcome of that episode? What's happened since?
Politically, things have taken a turn for the worse. We know this with reform, and we've got the Scottish elections coming up. There's very much anti-immigrant, anti-refugee, asylum seeker, the Nationality and Borders Bill that took effect, and the changes that were made to it. Essentially, I spoke about this almost everywhere I go, because there's still a lot of people that don't realise how quick the government's changed things around, where people like myself and Felipe, our parents weren't born here, our grandparents weren't born here. That potentially puts us in a far more sensitive position that our citizenship could be stripped. Priti Patel infamously said, being born in this country is a privilege, it's not a right. So how do you decide that? You've made us as second-class citizens. However, now, I know this sounds really bad and really pessimistic. I don't want to hold on to that, because in a way they've won. What I see in my community and the work that we are doing collectively and still ongoing is recognising that the stacks are against us, but this film and what we did that day kind of shows that solidarity means a lot. When you can come together as a community and you can recognise each other, you see yourself and your neighbour, and you see that your neighbour is just like you will come out time and time again. The media and politicians will always find ways to make us feel that we are so disconnected from one another, that we don't care, which is why we have this culture wars that are pitting gender, faith, race, everything against one another. But that's not how we're going to move on. And Kenmure Street, still, we're so quiet. It's like nothing ever happened. If I describe to you the triumph of that day, the very next day you could have heard a pin drop. It was like nothing had ever happened. You could feel something big had happened the day before, but everything was like quiet. The only thing that kind of gave it away that something may have happened here was the fact that there was lots of media, radio stations, TV, and again, it was people searching for who were the people that were there that day, but everyone was in their house just going about their normal business, going like, well, nothing really special happened. It did, but it meant everyone living there went, but we would do that anyway. And the thing is, Pollock Shields, if I describe to you as that area, it is predominantly Pakistani. We have always been the target of the far right, always. There have been some infamous cases in Pollock Shields, the murder of a young Scottish guy, Chris Donald, a child essentially, but that was used by the BNP and other far right movements to try to retribution against my community. But there were people within the white Scottish community that said, not in our name. And that's always been the case. The folk that live in Pollock Shields, whether they're white, brown, black, whoever, we've always understood who we are as a neighbourhood, as a community, and that solidarity that came in Kenmure Street, that's happened before, and we've always put a stop to it. It's just this time it was for 8-9 hours, and had we stayed the very next day, we were determined we're either going to all get arrested or we're just going to stick this one out. And that's what happened. We just stuck it out.
Well, I was going to ask you about the media attention. Did the media just disappear the next day, or did they hang around trying to?
No, they hung around. They
yeah.
definitely hung around. There were so many people trying to get and I think this is where a lot of the residents were hesitant. They were just like, no, we don't really want to talk to the media. There was a lot of mistrust as well. But like I said, Felipe, like that very first week and within a few days, approached me. And, when you just get a sense, I think people like myself who have faced racism, we kind of get a sense when someone's being genuine with us or someone's just trying to, get something out of it, like to use our experience to their advantage. But I never got that impression with Felipe at all. It was very...
I was just trying to get into Sundance, really.
Yeah, you were. This was the plan, by the way, from day one. But, yeah, it was the trust had to be the first established. So whereas other media were trying to... And we don't know how they would have, turned it around. That's the other thing. There's so much mistrust nowadays. You could be saying something and then, whatever clickbait in the era that we're in, anything you say can be misrepresented as well without context. So I think once the trust was established, it was very easy from then on. And I was saying to folk earlier as well that this process, it has been long, but now that it's here, the reception that we've had, almost every screening, it's to a degree we might feel a little biased because it's about us, but at the same token, it's like the audience isn't wrong. The fact that it resonates with so many people and they've had such an emotional reaction to it kind of just says a lot, whereas we thought it was no big deal. Actually, it is a big deal, especially now.
Well, on that note, especially now, I was going to ask both of you, what are your thoughts if this was to happen now, not 2021, given the climate we're in, given examples such as ICE in the US, given the increasing seeming lack of accountability, no red lines, etc., criminalisation of protests and so on. What do you think? Would you have anticipated such a reaction from the police now?
Honestly, no. I think we would come out again. I think that's a given. I don't think that's ever going to change. But the way the police are going to react now, we can tell. It's if you look at the protesters here in London, people are being dragged violently for just holding placards. They are what we would call peaceful demonstrations. The police have been so violent and so forceful. And I think a lot of this, actually, what's happening in America and other parts of the world, I feel the police here also feel emboldened that the politicians will protect them because they are, and that the media will protect them because they are. Whereas, you would think peaceful protesters wouldn't be seen as villains, but we're being portrayed as villains. It's upside down at the moment. So I think Kenmure Street would happen again, especially in Pollock Shields, especially in the south side. But the police, I fear that it would be very different now.
Felipe, do you have anything to add to that? I assume you agree.
I mean, I suppose it's hard to kind of take that. I think making that film is something I clearly needed to do for myself. The idea of kind of relearning that, not necessarily that history keeps on repeating itself. I think often it's a kind of, variation on the same theme. But the simple idea of you're just going to have to turn up. And to turn up, you're going to have to find an energy to turn up every time. And that energy is sustained by the community that you've built around you. So I think that's what I've witnessed that, Pollock Shields has done over the last few years. Quite a few things have happened, fires. Glasgow is plagued by them, not just recently, but it's been for the last 10 years. People being displaced because of kind of precarious accommodation, and somehow the community finding ways to kind of look after itself. So there's been all these kind of other smaller example of which to me, was really the success of Kenmure Street, is people understanding that you don't need to be, blowing shit up one battle after another style to be a revolutionary, or, maybe just disassembling your IKEA bookshelf to make a sign, or, documenting stuff from your phone and sending it to friends, taking foods, crisps, sanitary towel to a bus stop. That alone, is revolutionary itself. The idea of facing your fear to go, there's something bigger than the thing that I'm afraid of, and I can do something really small about it, and that's going to make me feel that I'm part of the community. All of these actions is what we need. It's create safe space. It was what Van Man says at the beginning, this idea of just buying time. He kind of got caught, and he turned up at the right time. The guys were being detained in their flats, so he just faced an empty van. He had he had to make this split-second decision, like many people had to do that day. He had that history of resistance in Glasgow, and he had the example of Brian Quayle, who's somebody who died in the last few weeks, who got arrested 27 times in his life for just lying down in front of lorries that were coming in and out of fast lane, so protesting the nuclear installation there. And Brian Quayle never stopped fast lane from going on. It hasn't stopped Scotland for having to store nuclear weapons. But that example inspired other people. And Van Man saw this, but then found himself, okay, what do I do now? And then 15 minutes later, a nurse turned up that was, off duty, and said, do you know what you're doing? And he was like, no. And so there's this sense of kind of people taking accountability for what they can, and not sort of kind of stretching it out and trying to be a hero. And I think all these little small actions, which were repeated throughout the day, and by many other people, that are not in the film, but just maybe, did not want to be in the film for various kind of reason. There's so much safeguarding about making a film in the times that we live in. I think all that has been present, and it's clearly, part of including those historical sequences in the film is to kind of pay homage to this sort of oral history that maybe hasn't been passed through education at school, or through maybe institutional organization, but has really been passed through the word of mouth, or through generations of what people were proud of. And I mean, that's something that they can't take away from the era, and in various other kind of similar neighborhoods across the UK, who just bear that history with them. And I think sometimes these people just need to, it goes back to this idea of how much time in your life do you have for this. Most people told me, well, I don't, right? Like, it's hard enough to make a living. It's hard enough to spend time with your family and have quality time with your family. It's hard enough to have time for yourself. But then this thing happens in front of you, and of course you're going to do something about it, right? There's like all these, I grew up with Chilean documentaries, and all these sort of like really small big stories, but that could be described in one sentence, where you hear it and you know exactly on what side you would stand. And I think there was something absolutely unavoidable about what people saw on Kenmure Street. And there's something that gives me hope, is that on Kenmure Street you only need 2,000 people to overturn the situation, which is really not that much, right? And so you get to think, well, if more people know about this, if more people know, if that maybe that example within their own lifetime of what they're able to do, what else can we achieve?
Thank you very much. I'd like to give the mic over to the audience. We have a roving mic, so if anyone has any questions for our guest tonight, or comments about the film. Yeah, we have one in the second row, please. Mike's just coming to you.
Hi, thank you. I'm from Edinburgh. I grew up going on things like Miners' Gala days, and really one of my earliest vivid memories has been the tent, watching the film footage of the coup in Chile, and being told by friends of my father, who was a trade unionist, that could happen here. That could be your dad in a football stadium being arrested. And having being really resentful because I had to give a pair of shoes that I really loved to some refugees because I loved them. and I remember my mum saying, well, actually, they're too small for you, and there are little girls whose dad are now in prison. And there's something about that continuity of working class solidarity, although Scottish class structure has changed, that I just wanted to say a real thank you for helping to articulate that's who we are and what we're about, although we don't agree about everything.
Yeah.
There is something about just that basic principle of solidarity and love and looking after one another that does transcend. Nae Passaran makes me cry every time, but this film makes me cry, but in a good way, because I think it is. And so the question is, what would you like us to do to help big that up in terms of that message around? None of us, I think, are particularly influential, but what can we do to help articulate the importance of this film in terms of our spheres of influence?
I mean, the film comes out tomorrow, and it plays in every cinema in Glasgow for at least a week, if not a few more. We've got a list. Just tell people to go. There was something quite interesting at Sundance where we finished the film literally maybe about 10 days before that screening. We finished the film 2 months ago. And that film screened between literally, I think it was 6 days earlier. Rennie Good had been killed in Minneapolis. 2 days after our film screen, Alex Pretty got killed in Minneapolis again. And, I think it is this thing. I think part of making this film is that just we want everybody to know as much as possible, and not just in Scotland, but everybody to feel connected. I think one of the weapons of the right is to make us feel really isolated, and that we're the only ones who feel this way, and so that their own outcome is inevitable, which is clearly not the case. But clearly the outcome of Kenmure Street hadn't reached the Americans, and so many turned up, partly because it was Sundance, but also because it was like, well, it's in the news, so we need to know more about it. But they were just so surprised that there was a happy ending, or that it was okay to laugh, it was okay to feel all these different emotions about it. And so I think just tell people. And now that it's a documentary, and and it's going to take some of your time, and and it's this worthy thing that you have to do because it's speaking about the now, just tell them it's going to be a good time. There's laughter, there's emotions. These are the type of phases in the film is what I remember from being a kid and seeing the grown-ups talk about what they might help with Chile, and I guess there's this whole spectrum of emotion going through it, and that made me feel safe at the time, and I think that's what we need to feel safe. There was something really interesting. One of the first people I talked to that week had this white face, English accent, who said, well, it's two people of color in the van, so we need to fill the space with people of color. It's solidarity. We all need to show support. So he runs across to the mosque. It was Eid. The mosque was full, and he says, well, this is happening. And somebody took him aside and said, yes, I mean, we all feel that this is horrible, but if the two of us go and stand in front of police, we shout the same thing, and we both get arrested, do you think we're going to end up in the same place? And the guy had this reaction of, I get this. We need to create a safe space first, and meet people who are comfortable to stand up to the police. And once we get to that stage, more people will turn up. I mean, that was the hope, but that's exactly what panned out on the day. And it felt like from the footage, by the afternoon, they almost had this kind of festival vibes of people bringing foods. Everybody who was the people were celebrating you turned up, bringing all the, wearing their kind of celebratory outfits, and it just kind of had this kind of snowball effect that I think made people who were incredibly worried, just not only to just turn into a protest, but maybe face the police, felt maybe this time it's okay to do it. And there's something, you were talking about kind of working class Scots. There's, as part of the research for the film, I talked to so many, including Brian Quayle, to so many former activists around Glasgow. And I took this amazing woman, Kathy Galloway, which was the first female warden of the Iona community. It was sort of a kind of religious community, but also an activist community on the island of Iona, and has been part of, you know, different kind of struggle throughout her life. And she said, you know, as a working class Scottish woman, all I have is my body. And most injustice will be invisible to most people. So what you do, you put your body in front of the invisible injustice and you make it visible to others. And I think we have, generally enough faith in the sort of, in humanity to know that if you can make that injustice visible, people will get it straight away and they will join however they can. And I think that's what happened on Kenmure Street. So this idea of if you're able to see the injustice, I mean, that's amazing in the first place. So then what is the next thing that you specifically, Roz, with all the skills and your own experience, could you add to it? And you don't have to blow shit up. Nobody does that really. You just have to see it and call it out. And then, you know, I don't know if you've got any IKEA furniture in your, whatever it is.
Unfortunately, yes.
Or paint from Lidl. But, you know, there's something you'll think of in the moment because it's in your blood, right? And it's in your history. Clearly. So I think sometimes just trusting that and seeing it is enough.
Thank you. Yep, go ahead. Yeah, of course.
So this is, it's not a question, it's a comment. As a very proud Southsider, Shawlands, not quite Walshields, but Shawlands, I'm an even prouder Southsider tonight, so thank you very much. I grew up in the history of Clydeside, John McLean, my father's name, and Jimmy Reid, and all those other people that came in their wake. And I acknowledge how powerful the opening scenes were of the film, and that film just made me the proudest person in this room tonight. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for this. Do we have any other questions? Yeah, I've got one at the back.
Thank you so much. I have a comment and a question. So my dad also came to the UK fleeing Pinochet, and your previous film meant a lot to me. I'm a career trade unionist because of it, so I just want to say thank you for the previous film as well. I've been trying to formulate the question, and I think it's, I think your action and your film have very much inspired a lot of the response to the situation in Palestine. And I think watching that film, it was clear to me that there had been some preparation, and I think sometimes we prepare for things we don't know what's going to happen, but we, you know, there's ways that we organise and that we prepare for, even when we wouldn't call it that, we wouldn't acknowledge it as that, for anything that might happen that might threaten our communities. And I guess my question is around that. And what do you think people should be doing to prepare at the moment?
I mean, I think the good thing is that there's lots of organizations already doing the work, and it's sort of, you know, thankless work. Nobody's making films about them. I mean, even for this, you know, there's. I mean, you know, I think the work that happened on Kenmure Street lies very much on there's sort of kind of the bigger history that people are aware of, and it kind of brought it up to the streets. But there's been about 20 years of work since the Glasgow Girls campaign, where these high school students were literally making a small documentary about living in Scotland as New Scots. I mean, that was the theme of it. And while they were making these little documentary and filming themselves, one of their classmates got detained. And it spurred this whole campaign. That I think, if you're in Scotland, and I think probably in the UK, most people will have heard of the Glasgow Girls campaign. As Rosa said, it's part of the curriculum up north. And there was this shock, I suppose, on the day of Kenmure Street, of people were like, but we've done this before, right? Like the Glasgow Girls have stopped this. Like they're not allowed to do this in Scotland anymore. And part of it is just, I think, because of that previous story, and because the way it had been told, and because the way it had been shared, and all the work that's been done, in school materials and all this, and the work of organizations that, again, that injustice have been made so visible organization were created on the back of this. There just seemed to be that kind of shared information and consciousness on the day that people just knew that not only this is, it may not be illegal, but it's immoral, and that is enough sometimes to just act on and change things. So I think just you coming to see this film, it's not the kind of, I think, I'm so grateful for people who come see documentaries midweek. I think there's sort of a shared knowledge that you already act on. I think it's knowing that people have been doing the work. I think quite quietly, quite silently, and again, you don't have to go really far. I think one of the success of Kenmure Street was it was just so hyper local. It was on their doorstep, and we just come off the screening at Rio Cinema in Dalston, where they stopped a deportation on the back of what happened in Kenmure Street. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I think there's just so much around you that already exists, and there's comfort with this. And I think all you have to do is probably type anti-raids, or and you'll find like-minded people who will be more than happy to kind of have your support and volunteer. And it's
So can I add something?
Go for it. Go for it.
It's going to tie your question also to what you had said, Roz, as well. So the thing is, we're both Scottish. That's an undeniable truth. There are people here that will make me believe that I'm not Scottish just by the colour of my skin, which isn't true. So the way you tackle that and the way you find solidarity with one another is basically find your common ground, what connects us, not what divides us. And what we do is we show up every time to our community, do simple things. So I come from a Pakistani community, I was born in Scotland. I'm also Muslim. The one thing that we do, and we lovingly do, is make food, share food, feed people. That's our love language. And most people, Middle East or anywhere, this is just the way that we connected with British people in Britain, because our parents didn't speak English. So how did they approach their neighbours? They fed them. And the one thing that I find very successful, and I find that this is how Kenmure Street and my connections within that area became so powerful, and why people turned up that day, was even simple acts of kindness. It's get to know your neighbours, get to know people that you normally would not speak to, or just because it's your lived experience. We're more used to being with people from our own background. It's a natural thing. In some way it's like tribalism, but there's safety in there. But be a little bold, be a little adventurous, find out who are your neighbours, especially those that are new to this country, and bond over food. Honestly, there's nothing more powerful than music, because it doesn't need a language, it's universal. Food as well. That saying that mums say, oh, the way to a man's heart through his belly. No, the way to anyone's heart is through their belly. Just feed people. If you feed people, if you share what you have, your resources, then honestly, it's simple acts of kindness, simple acts of being together. And we need it now more than ever, because as I say, the way the politics of this country are going now, it's a scary time for a lot of us. I sit here and I know I'm with people who don't look at me through that lens. But when I walk out that door, I don't know who's here that thinks I don't belong here just because I don't look like them. So it's more important now that you put your bodies in the line. And I know that sounds dangerous, but the consequences of me doing that and the consequences of you doing that are very different. And that's what I think, if you can take anything away, it's just do that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That's Lisa, thank you. I've got a few questions. We're going to go down, so third, fourth row, and then down. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the film, which was wonderful. A couple of things. I don't know if people already know, but on the 28th of March, everyone's nodding, so everyone knows. That's okay then. Good.
Everyone's nodding.
But it was like, and when I heard about the Together Alliance, I was like, oh, thank goodness, because this is what I'd been hoping for, was that all these different organisations were going to get together, like all of the nature organisations did for the Restore Nature Now March, and then you end up with 60,000 people, which is a huge statement. So that's great that everyone knows. And the other thing, I guess, that people can do if they're concerned if they want to, is look a little bit into the proposals for the changes to earned settlement, which the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood is trying to push through, and write to your MP. But yesterday, yesterday 500 people from all over the country, including Arbroath. There was one person from Northern Ireland. They got a big cheer. And people came from Cornwall, Wales, went to the House of Commons for a mass lobby and spoke to our MPs to say that we don't agree with it. So, and if you keep doing that, I think that can work. And also a lot of the Labour MPs don't like it anyway, and I think the rebellion is growing. But a lot of if you look and find out if you have a Labour MP, how big their majority is. I mean, some of their majorities are like very small. So sorry, there's no question here. I just wanted to say those two things because I think they're things that people can do if they want to, if they have the time and they want to. Keep plugging away.
I think the point about Shabana Mahmood, for me, what sticks out is that she's Pakistani and she's Muslim. And she's superseded Preeti Patel and Swala Braverman. And these are all women of colour. They're South Asian women that have said and actually overseen the most racist policies. And they're like me. And it just doesn't make any sense. And it's true. It's like, if their white counterparts had said that, they would be called out for being racist. And I think it's deliberate. I think it's a political move to put these women in the front. And they've chosen also, they've agreed. It's not like they were forced. That in itself is something. And I think people sometimes are afraid and they go, we don't really want to be political, but everything's political. Everything is. We can't escape it. From the moment we're born to the minute we're gone from here, it is. And even me being here, it is political. It's very hard not to make it such. So I think the more people feel comfortable calling out racism, even if it's coming from people that look like me, call it out. They shouldn't be given a free pass just because they look like me, and they don't get to weaponise their race and their faith to oppress others. Yeah. No.
If it's any consolation, I bumped into a tourist who was visiting some friends, and I can't remember where he came from, but he was visiting friends who were British Pakistani, and all they were talking about was Shabana Mahmood. And like, what is going on?
What a letdown.
And he was like, this woman Shabana, and I went, oh, I like this. And he went, yes, what is she doing? I was like, I don't understand why she's not a Conservative. It's very bizarre.
No, Reform want her. The fact that Reform said that, she wanting to join our party, that just explains it all.
Thank you very much. We had a question, I think, in the second row.
Thank you. It's really powerful film and really powerful storytelling. So kind of moving away from the politics and the activism, I wanted to get back into the craft and ask you, do you feel like you would have made the same film if you had have been there? Or is that actually the fact that you weren't there something that let's absolve you of the guilt? Because maybe that's what's let it be such a clear and powerful film.
I mean, it's something I've definitely been thinking about in the last few months. I don't know. I think I kind of worried that if I'd been there, I would have felt what everybody felt. And obviously there would have been, I don't know if I would have had the energy to sustain it to carry things for so long. Part of it is my own curiosity. And these type of films are rabbit holes. And I do think it's important to have a little bit of distance. I mean, the themes of it are so close to my own life, but I suppose the community wasn't mine when I started. And I think it probably helped to kind of, keep pushing and finding a few other people. But it is, again, it's a difficult question to answer because now I can't really separate this film from my own life. It just takes so much time. And it was the Sinfonia Passerella, that was 6 years, this was 4.5 years. And I think there's the thing of the story has to kind of drive you. From the beginning, there's no I never kind of think, oh, this is going to be a couple of years of my life and that's it. So I think one thing is the story that I'm trying to tell. Another one is the people that are part of it. I mean, to me specifically, at least, I think it's I know that these people are going to be part of my life for a few years, and it's important that I'm as present as possible. I mean, and the third aspect is kind of sort of the filmmaking itself and the craft, and being excited by the choice, and because it is, it's not something. This is a film that was incredibly hard to fund in the times that we live in. We use eventually crowdfunding, and then this whole campaign with Scottish trade unions. Literally, I remember driving to Dundee to go to this the big STUC conference, and as I was driving, Sinners had just come out, and I was listening to this podcast by Ryan Coogler, and he there's this one podcast where he just kind of broke down when he'd met with Spike Lee, and Spike Lee, and Spike Lee was telling him about the making of Malcolm X, and how obviously Spike Lee was Spike Lee, and he had some backing, but he says, I want to make this a film. This is not an anecdote. This film needs a kind of budget for multiplexes. It needs to be anamorphic lenses and big lights and special effects and big names, and that's not the kind of money that studios were giving me. So he basically drove around the country to all these African American communities and said, like, this is a story we're trying to tell, and we're going to need more money than what the studios are willing to give us. And they're literally pulling into this gathering of all the Scottish trade union, and I feel like about the same thing. And I had this great feeling of like, maybe this is incredibly hard, but maybe I'm in the right place doing the right thing. And that's how these type of stories about what's considered minorities are being told at the moment. And I think it did remove a little bit of, I suppose, maybe some anxieties, and kind of energized me to kind of think like I'm maybe putting my hat down and asking for begging for a few pounds, but it's literally what allows to finish the film. It's that money from non-institutions, from people who don't really fund films usually, that allows to finish the film and send it to Sundance. And it's being at Sundance that connected us with really kind of private investors who have allowed to literally, as of 2 days ago, close our budget, and we need to pay for this film and for the archives so they've been screened across the country. So it's I don't know, like, I think it's a hard thing to kind of the sort of abstract of it. Like, would I have made the film if I wasn't there? I think maybe it would have been a slightly different film. Maybe it would have been. I
think you had major FOMO. Your FOMO was a fire. It was.
Yeah. I hate missing out on things. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, and thank you. It's a really good movie. And I was struck by the educational, like, contextualizing snippets that you put in there that contextualize the whole action and things that, the people that were there kind of, as you were saying, would know about. But perhaps people not from Scotland wouldn't necessarily make those connections. So it was really helpful that you put that in the movie. And it made me think that perhaps this film should be used for education. Have you thought about bringing it into schools, secondary schools, and history students and places like that?
I mean, I suppose because of the experience of Nepasaran, which ended up with some school screenings, I think I know that's a possibility here. It's kind of similar history, but it's almost like we haven't had to really think about it. There's teachers have been in touch, with our distributor, and talk about, in Falkirk at the moment, there's a lot of protest against asylum seekers in hotels. And we got this email from a local school saying, there's kids in our school who are going through that process, and their status is pending. And because of everything that's happening, the language that is on receiving it of is getting, clearly just more and more racist. And so they said that they did come to the screening in Bo'ness, which is close to Falkirk, and they'd been sharing the trailer with the students. And so they said, is there any chance we can organize screenings here? And I mean, it's amazing. As I said, we finished with them 2 months ago, and we're not even in cinemas yet. It's only happening tomorrow, and we're already thinking, how do we share this film as far and wide as possible? And some of the protesters involved on the day, 4.5 years ago, have now become community leaders, working with academic organization, and so it feels like now we can expand on this, and people who have this sort of lived experience, but also the language and the connection to kind of act on this thing, and hopefully it'll be in the curriculum in Scotland in a few years, but at least it's very easy to just say yes to schools and organize kind of assembly hall screenings. It's going to be, I think, a busy year for all of us.
Very much on that note. Big round of applause, Felipe.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for joining us tonight, and thank you everyone for coming to this screening.